everyone, and welcome to Food for Life this week. My name's Ashley Tresleen. I'm the host, in case you didn't notice. See, I put that handy little host thing down the bottom. And wow, has it been hot today. I know the whole country is experiencing quite the heat wave, so I hope you're all staying hydrated, staying cool, and not exercising too much in this heat, okay? Now, there's a few ways we can stay hydrated. We can drink our water, but we can also eat our water. So you guys can eat some foods that are hydrating, like lettuce, cucumbers, watermelon. You know, some of the stuff's really fun to freeze, like little watermelon chunks. The kids love them. So make sure we're all taking care of ourselves. My guest this week is Annie Curtis. She has quite a few jobs she's had in the past, but she now owns ACFit. We have some similar philosophies about health and wellness, and I can't wait for you guys to meet her. After we have a message from the good people at E26, then we'll welcome Annie into the conversation. And we're back. And I apparently pressed the wrong button, which you all know I'm famous for. I should have gotten used to all this technology by now, and you would think I would have, but apparently I have not. So let's give a big welcome to Annie. Hi, Annie. How are you today?
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I love talking with all kinds of different wellness experts and to hear their stories and their philosophies. I feel like I can always learn something from anyone else. So why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do, kind of in your own words.
Well, I'm Annie. I am the owner and operator of ACFit. I am an NASM certified personal trainer, and I'm also a licensed independent clinical social worker. ACFit is a movement and wellness coaching business that focuses on an integrative approach to coaching that's good for both the mind and the body. So we really try to take an integrative approach.
I love that, because if your mind's not right, then your body's not right. Everything's connected, right?
Yes. Absolutely. I think so as a social worker, I sort of, I have a background in mental health and in my professional experience, and also just as a human being living on this earth. I think that we know that sometimes we feel emotions in our body first before we understand sometimes what's going on. The coaching approach that I take is really trying to sort of meld these two very important parts of who we are up here, but also sort of in our bodies.
That's very nice, and a nice way to put that. Now, what made you want to be a social worker and a personal trainer? They're very different careers, like they're connected, but so on the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, all my life, just generally, I've been a very active person. I grew up playing all kinds of sports. I played college field hockey. So really a lot of my life revolved around movement and exercise and competing. So there was a little bit of time there when I graduated college that I thought maybe I would go into some sort of fitness profession, but I also really enjoyed helping people. I did AmeriCorps right out of college.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of launched me more into a professional sphere of social work. So I kind of worked my way up in the social work world. After college, I got a master's degree at Springfield College. We were just connecting about being Springfield College alums.
Yeah.
And I was in the social work field, sort of in the thick of it. It's a really important field. It's a really diverse field. Social workers do all kinds of things. And it was really rewarding. But I also noticed, sort of in my own knowledge base of the body and fitness informally, I was kind of, in my profession, I was noticing like, hey, I think we're missing a piece here around movement being an important tool to support healing. And so that's sort of what got the gears rolling in terms of my professional experience shifting a little bit more to learn about the body, which is, I eventually decided to get my personal trainer's license. So I could sort of have knowledge. I didn't necessarily think they were going to like come together the way that they have. The more that I do this work, the more I see how important it is and how there's just not a ton of services that integrate these two pieces together.
I think it's interesting that you put that. And also a lot of people don't know social workers can do a lot of different things. I remember one of the first therapists I ever had when I was younger was actually a licensed social worker. She wasn't like a psychologist or a psychiatrist. She was a social worker. And they do talk therapy, which people don't realize is something that social workers can do, right?
Yes. Well, and I think sometimes folks don't necessarily know, a professional licensed social worker is someone who's accredited by an outside body and can provide those types of services. Sometimes we label lots of people social workers, and not that that's not, it's not a bad thing, but, there are the social workers that can really do some of the deeper work are the ones who have that licensure as well. But they are doing different things outside of the therapy world. I mean, I think I'm an example of one of them who's sort of like doing something a little different. They're running nonprofits. They're working in hospitals. They're some of them are running financial literacy sort of organizations. So the field is pretty diverse in terms of the different things that you can do. And I think
they do everything, don't they?
They can really do a lot of things, and they're trained in a little bit wider breadth of scope than like a psychologist. They're sort of trained in more of a community worldview versus kind of, what does it say in the DSM and some of the particulars around clinical interventions. So
now that you're here now in Massachusetts, and you're from Vermont, and you're a social worker, you're a personal trainer, when did you finally make the move with your family down here? Because I know, you went to school down here, but how long have you been living here in Massachusetts?
So I've actually been here since about 2009. So when I graduated college, my husband and I met in college, and most of our friends were moving to Boston. And we both, I'm from Vermont, a pretty rural spot, and my husband's from Western Mass. And we thought, I think we'd be happier in Western Mass. And we love it here. We have never regretted settling here, and we haven't left since. So we've been here since 2009, kind of building our life and raising our family.
Well, I can definitely see how being here, if you've been from Vermont, and being in Boston would be such a big change.
It's really funny because some of our friends were kind of like, oh, like you're going to live in Western Mass? Like there's not a lot going on there. And I was like, there's plenty going on in Western Mass compared to what I'm used to. So the Valley is a wonderful place. There's such a mix of things to do. There's cities, there's cows, there's all kinds of things. And the natural beauty of this area is really spectacular. We're very lucky.
Some days you can see both a city and a cow.
Yes, exactly.
So you've been down here since 2009. So this is now your new home. So what drives you to help people? A social worker and a personal trainer are both careers that help people. They're a helping profession to make people's lives better. Yeah. So what makes you want to have a career that helps people and make their lives better?
Oh gosh, that's so many ways to answer that.
Take your time.
So, I'll start with just like the sort of surface level professional pieces about like the business I have now. And, I mentioned that I really enjoyed the social work field and it's the diversity of things that social workers can do. But like there was some of this body practice that I felt like maybe wasn't being utilized the best way it could. The flip side of that was the more I sort of like entered the fitness world fully as a professional and as a woman who's existed in the fitness world as a consumer, it can be a really harmful place for people in different types of bodies. Particularly my experience as a woman, most of the things being marketed to me were weight loss, cut the fat, cardio, cardio, cardio. So I really wanted to help people, particularly women, to see a different way, a way that was not hating the body, not trying to shrink the body, but trying to sort of build strong, healthy habits from a more positive place within. And that comes from just my own experience as a woman existing in the world and being sick of seeing these messages berating me. So in terms of helping people in that way, that's what sort of motivated me to create a safe space for people to move their bodies and work on their bodies and sort of try to ditch some of these harmful diet culture and fitness culture mantras. So really sort of like melding that social work piece and making a welcome place. Generally speaking, and I'll share just something a little bit personal. I lost my brother to suicide about 10 years ago. It happened right around when I started social work school. He was an incredible human being. He gave the best hugs, and I'm so thankful for the years that I had with him. He was a wonderful big brother. But his spirit certainly drives me to find ways to support people and support their healing processes that are outside of what might be typical. I don't think he probably would have been a person who would show up to see a therapist, and I think that there's a lot of people who maybe won't enter into a traditional therapy, but maybe they would like go for walks and lift weights with a therapist who could do that with them, something a little more approachable than sort of like sitting on a couch in a very vulnerable way. So that's certainly something else I always have bubbling in the back of my mind. I mean, I think we all have these undercurrents of stories that we carry with us that sort of drive us into the spaces that we end up in. And that's a peace of mind that sort of keeps me moving forward.
I'm sorry you lost your brother. That's got to be traumatic and hard, especially starting a new chapter of your life when you probably wanted him with you.
Yeah, I mean, grief is a very complex process and complex experience for any human, especially when something complicated happens at the end of someone's life or sudden. It was really hard. But I will say part of that experience and healing and sort of dealing with my grief and using lifting weights around the same time that I was healing from this experience, I took up weights, like heavy weights, really sort of like lifting heavy. And there's all kinds of studies that are now emerging. Back when I started doing this, it wasn't as documented. But there is all kinds of studies that show the benefits of weightlifting specifically and how it can impact mental health and healing. That was certainly my experience and continues to be a really important tool. And I see it every day with my clients too, in terms of supporting their health and well-being as well.
I actually started, it's really funny, is I started with my trainer during the pandemic. I actually didn't meet her in person until a year ago because we had been working virtually for so long, and we still do actually, because we don't live very close to each other. And for my health, we keep it that way because it's just safer.
Mm.
And I found out, like, the reason I started working out is that they encouraged me to do it for my mental health. I had less to do about my physical health and more to do with my mental health, like managing my stress and my anxiety and trying to find a new routine, and I didn't have one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because during the pandemic, like so many of us, all our routines were upended. So this was my new routine.
What was the experience like for you? Like as you started to like increase weight a little, like what was that like for you sort of as you were moving through that process with your trainer?
Well, it's really funny is because I have MS, and so my body doesn't always do what I want it to.
Yeah.
So there's some days like she would ask me, how does this feel? Or how do you feel? And then I'd be like, I don't know. I'm like, you'll have to ask me later tonight because my body doesn't always register that something's wrong.
Right.
But now I've noticed changes. And like you were talking about being a woman, that my clothes fit differently because we've been working out now for 2 years. And it's not a bad thing that my clothes fit differently. It's because I built muscle mass and it's all muscle. It's not like bad muscle, and I haven't really, but like the numbers on the scale changed and things, but none of it was for a bad reason. But in your head, you have that thing as a girl that like, oh my God, something's wrong.
That is that sort of like cognition that you described is one of the biggest challenges, at least that I face with supporting. Well, I face as a fellow woman, first of all. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, hello. Yes. But also, which is totally normal. But then also supporting my clients who most are women, 99% of them are women, and really sort of trying to get out of that mentality that like the scale dictates how I'm going to feel emotionally. The scale dictates all of what my health might be. The scale dictates if I'm being successful. And if it stays below a certain number, it's really, we've been so ingrained as people and just honestly as a society. It's not just women necessarily, but to like live and die by the scale.
Yeah.
It's really, those are part of those like fitness culture, regular culture things that I try to help people reframe, because sort of coming at health and fitness from a place of shame and living and dying by the scale ultimately doesn't help build sustainable, healthy habits and change.
It's weird. Like I don't weigh myself very often, and I don't know about you. I don't know if that's something you do, but like I have to go to the doctors because I'm seeing probably more than most people that go to the doctors once a year. And every time I refuse to get on the scale, I'm like, no, thank you. I'm like, do I have to do it today? Like, is there a reason you need me to get on the scale? And if they say no, I refuse. But like, you have your little charts online now, like when you have to go in and fill something out for the doctor, and you see that in your BMI. And I was talking with my trainer the other day about BMI, and I'm like, it keeps saying my BMI has been going up the last few years. And I'm like, but there's nothing like, but I have less fat on me than before I started training. Like, how does that make sense to anybody? Now, is that something you have to explain to your clients? Because she was trying to explain to me about how it doesn't actually make sense, BMI, and it's all outdated and everything.
Oh man.
Did I ask a bad question?
No, this is I wasn't sure we were going to get into this stuff, but
we can get into whatever you want.
No, I think it's really important that we talk about this. So, there is a really, really good book called Fearing the Black Body: A History of Fat Phobia in the United States. And the interesting part about it is it tracks the history of the BMI and weight, sort of where does this instrument come from that we like base health insurance on. We go to the doctor, they show us the charts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was based on like in the early 1900s, and don't quote me verbatim, but an insurance guy in the 1900s went out and like randomly collected data on a lot of like middle-aged white men, and that's the data that determined BMI basically. So it's like a scale that's not necessarily inclusive. It also just generally, as a fact, it doesn't take into account the fact that muscle weighs more than fat. So there are people who are within healthy BMIs but don't have muscle, who maybe are at more risk for certain health issues than people who might be higher BMI but have more muscle. So it's a pretty imperfect tool. But I have heard that there are some doctors' offices who are trying to do different things. You know, they're putting little signs by the scale and saying, you know, you don't have to be weighed if this is going to be something that doesn't make you feel good or triggers other things. And that gives me hope that we're really trying to measure health in a more holistic way and not just like, what does the number say on the scale?
It's crazy that after all these years, almost 100 and something years later, they're not even thinking that, oh, hey, maybe there's something wrong with us.
Yes. Yes.
It doesn't make sense to anybody. And it's so funny. It's just because I couldn't understand how, if I'm technically stronger and I have muscle definite, like it just, I'm looking at this going, I don't get it. It's like one of those like things where you're standing like in line somewhere and you're like, I don't understand why I have to fill out 4 forms to do the simplest of tasks kind of thing.
Did you, and I hear about this from when I like open this question up on Instagram sometimes, and people have these really very specific memories of like middle school gym, having to get weighed, or like, you know, they would do weigh-ins at school. At least that happened in my middle school.
We had to do like the president's fitness test and stuff growing up, like all that stuff. But I was a figure skater growing up.
Okay.
And I think my coaches were never like that, but I was around girls who had some unhealthy habits. And then being around some, in the summer, we would go down to Connecticut and there'd be international coaches. And it's really funny, certain countries, they look at us and like we'd be horrified. Like they would be talking about us because we weren't, I don't know, look like a ballerina kind of shape.
Right.
And so in my head, sometimes I swear I think there's like a flashback in my head from that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, those are the types of experiences that we all sort of have as our foundation of like who I am and what my body is to me and what is valuable in my body. And those don't leave us, especially when the sort of outside forces are saying you need to be smaller, lose weight, you know, like it is not second nature to sort of flip the script, sort of like you're describing too, you know, it's pretty challenging.
I mean, I'm sure you've had like being an athlete most of your life. I'm sure you had times where things just, I don't know, some little thing just didn't make sense to you, or you had to be weighed, or somebody was telling you something that just, as an adult now, you're sitting there going, oh my God, I can't believe I sat through that.
You know, it's so funny at our school, and I'll never forget this. I was a 3-sport athlete. I could run a sub-6 mile. Like I ate a variety of foods, like all of those things would make your average person think that, oh, okay, she's a pretty active, like relatively healthy, balanced young woman. Was also pretty muscular. I'm still pretty muscular. So we had this BMI machine in gym class. You like held on to it. It was like very like high tech at the time. And it would measure your BMI. And my BMI was like technically overweight. And I remember my first reaction was like, oh, well, I can run a sub-6 mile. Like, I'm fine. But one of the adults in charge of this activity said, ooh, you should probably work on that. You're overweight. And I was like, and I remember that was like a very searing moment because all of these other logical things were like, but I do all these things. And it was like this one BMI reading means you're not healthy. And it just didn't add up to me.
Yeah.
Even then, as sort of like a young and somewhat vulnerable person.
It's so weird. I mean, think about the stuff we grew up with. At least they're being a little more patient with kids and gotten rid of some things that measure regular standards of things, and they're being more inclusive of what is best to measure kids by, and you don't need to necessarily measure their physical abilities with everything.
Yes.
And it's just crazy. I think about some of the things when I talk to people, when I interview them, and some of the stories that they say or that I tell about growing up, and I'm sitting there going, I went to Catholic school. Like, so we didn't do the necessarily mentioning it, but we were really driven with the perfection thing. Like, you don't amount to anything unless you're perfect kind of thing. So I kind of have those issues.
Yeah.
But I got to imagine everyone has different issues from sports or college or whatever. And I think that drives how women see their bodies too.
Exactly. I think even under the best of circumstances, it's impossible to get away from all of these other pieces that are impacting how we view our bodies. And I think especially with the advent of social media, like when we were kids, it was like they taught us media literacy, like they airbrushed the Cosmopolitan magazine, like it wasn't like, oh my God, look at how they can edit photos that are totally fake on social media. So I just think that the amount of images that we're sort of receiving and consuming at all ages, even as 30 something women and more, it's really something to pay attention to, and how those messages feel and make us feel.
Now you have 2 small kids, so how do you model healthy behaviors and help them? I mean, they're so young now that, I mean, they are taking in messages, but they're not really in the world yet where other people are going to start telling them things.
Yes. I think that, when we go to the gym, like we all go, there's a child care at our gym. It's the best at Northampton Athletic Club. I'm putting a plug in for them because they're amazing. We all go to the gym and we all have fun, and the kids sort of see us moving, but not necessarily moving our bodies for an aesthetic look. Like, we're moving our bodies because it makes us feel good and we sleep better at night. And so whenever we talk about exercise and movement, we're not pairing it with a self-deprecating comment like, oh, I gotta work off that cake, let's go to the gym. It's like, ooh, let's go like lift weights and be strong and we'll sleep good tonight. So that's one way that we try to reframe movement, especially. And they see us do it. And then in terms of food, I guess this is every parent has different ways of approaching food, but we personally just try to give them a variety of foods to pick from, whether it's a cupcake or carrots or cucumbers, so there's always all kinds of things on their plate. We're not classifying foods as good or bad. And honestly, my kids, like just the other night, we had, they had pudding and like 3 veggies and, a couple of other things, like a little kid charcuterie, and they ate all the veggies and 2 bites of the pudding. So it's just like they kind of are not seeing food as holding certain values yet. I know that there's only so long that will last, but
wait until they get friends.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's not to say that if a parent chooses to do different things with their kid, like, putting hard limits on sugar and other things, that's, there are so many different ways to feed your kid, and none of them are wrong. That's just the way that we choose to approach it and try to limit the pressure.
I think that's a good way of doing it. I mean, personally, I'm always fond of the 80-20 rule for food, like 80% something good, and then the 20% you can have a treat or that extra glass of wine, so that it's kind of a good way to remember balance in your life.
Yes.
So that no one overdoes anything.
Yeah, and certainly, and we know that all or nothing doesn't work generally, right? Whether it's exercise or blowing up your world to start a new diet and have no carbs. Like, generally speaking, it's not sustainable and it doesn't end up sticking. So like you said, sort of approaching things with balance. And one of the things that I talk with my clients about is, and I'm not sure if this is something you've experienced, but for so many years, we're paying attention to these external diets to tell us what to eat. And we sort of arbitrarily cut all these foods out, and we aren't really checking in with ourselves. Like, well, what do I actually want to eat? Like, what is it that I am wanting to eat? And what is it that I'm craving versus like, oh, but my diet says I have to do 1 cup of this and this and this, and I can't have the thing that I want. If that makes
weird.
sense.
No, it does. And I always talk to clients about, there's a difference. Like what my mom notices makes her gain weight is not the same thing that I notice would make me gain weight. And for my clients, that may be the same. They may notice that if they overdo some desserts, that's what's going to make them. Or if somebody realizes that, hey, I went out with my friends and I've been going out a little more and been drinking a little more, that may be what's making them gain weight. Or if they hit the carbs a little too hard. All of our bodies react differently to food. So if you're trying to start and you want to keep yourself a little fitter, or you don't need to cut anything out. You just need to maybe balance those things in your diet so you're not overdoing the sugar or the carbs or the drinks. You just need to kind of set limits for those things in your diet so that you're not, spending every day eating 10 bowls of pasta or something,
Right. And what we know in terms of like how the brain works is if you're like, let's say you're like, I want to like take some steps. I want to like get really healthy. I'm going to cut out pasta. Even though I love it, I'm going to cut it out. What ends up happening is your brain ends up it sort of turns on in a way that says, well, now all I can think about is wanting that pasta because you're telling me it's not going to be here. So it's this scarcity mentality. So then when pasta is around, your brain shoots out all these signals, eat all the pasta, eat it all, versus I'm going to have a little pasta if I want it. I'm not going to have a box, but I think I want some. You're less likely ultimately to consume boxes and boxes of it if you sort of like honor some of that craving,
I think if you fit that, I think in a healthy diet, there's always just room for balance of things. I tell my clients always that diet is a 4-letter word. I mean, if you need a genuine guideline, you can maybe take something from this that you feel works in your life or that. But I've cooked for clients that are really strict, like paleo, or they're really strict on keto. Every time everyone asks me how I feel about that, and they are saying they're getting results, I try not to say anything because they're so happy, and I don't want to force my opinions on anyone. Right. I just make food that fits into it for them, and if that's what they want to do. But if I'm starting from scratch with them building a menu with me, I prefer that we don't do things like that.
Yes, that's got to be a really tricky line for you to sort of walk and sort of obviously honoring what your clients want and supporting them. And then sort of figuring out where is there room to sort of encourage balance versus sort of these harder lines.
Some people eventually come to it on their own when they realize that, they went on vacation and they went off their diet. And then when they come back, they're not seeing the results afterwards. They're not seeing. And then I'm like, okay, let's refocus on your menu for the week. Let's refocus on what we start making this month for you.
Yes. Yeah.
But some people don't, and they love it, and that's fine. And if that's what they want to do, but I'm not going to be. They're hiring me to cook for them. I can't exactly say.
Yes, exactly. There's definitely, at least for me and my approach and this is, because my lens is sort of like the anti-diet lens and sort of the the not focusing on weight lens. Typically, if I have a discovery call with a client who's really like, I am here to lose weight, in my role, I will redirect them to somebody else because it's really not what I do. Sort of, I do the opposite of sort of like coming back into your body. But that's sort of like, that's different. But usually, most of the time, people will come around and they're like, well, I think I want to try this. Let me give this a try.
Especially if I cook like something that's just healthy and well balanced for their family, and I have to cook something separate for them, then they're like, oh, my family looks like they're eating something healthy. Like maybe I'll try that instead. Like, oh yeah, and my kids are eating it. I mean, I have clients who they have like an 18-month-old, and everything healthy I make for them, they give to her, and she eats pieces of it here and there. I mean, she can't eat everything I give them, but she likes it. She eats fish tacos, and she was eating this chicken salad I made for them, and it was all healthy and, no additives. I go to the farmer's market. I work with local vendors. I love it. I have to say, I think people forget that we have so much local good produce. This is the time people get outside and go visit a farm or a farm stand or a market somewhere. Do you tell people about like local ingredients to go to?
Yeah, well, and there's also what's really great about Massachusetts is folks who have food stamps can get double. I'm pretty sure this is still the case. They can get double the amount of their food stamps at a farmer's market. So I know, so I live in Deerfield, and there's farms all over the place. There's little farm stands. And I realize I'm very lucky to live in a place where it's abundant. But I know that, we live in Western Mass, and there's certain areas that are food deserts, and it's harder to get access to this beautiful produce that's grown in our backyards. But I do know that there are farmers markets in some areas that don't have access to grocery stores or access to the local produce. And the best part is you get double your money. So the farmers get more business, and folks have access to fresh fruits and veggies. It is fantastic time of year. What is one of your favorite dishes to make this time of year?
Oh my God. I have this problem where like when everything looks really good at the farm stand, I have to be like, okay, so when I ideally have time to cook this week, what can I freeze and how much can I actually eat in one week? Because otherwise I will literally like go buy everything. But I'm really into tomatoes right now and the blueberries. It's serious tomato and blueberry season. So I've been eating blueberries pretty much every morning lately.
Yep.
What about you?
Oh gosh. So I really like tomatoes. I didn't think I liked tomatoes until I started living in Western Mass and like have them fresh. I'm like, oh no, I like tomatoes. I just like fresh tomatoes. So I love tomatoes and corn. So there's tons of fresh corn grown sort of basically in our backyard. Warner Farm in Sunderland has delicious corn. So yeah, corn and tomatoes are like the best.
You should take the kids berry picking or something.
Yeah, we actually went to Atlas Farm has a berry patch that we went to.
Yeah.
They come out covered. And then I'm at my father-in-law's, and he has a little blueberry patch in his backyard. So every time we come, they run over to the blueberry patch and covered in blueberries after. So it is a very
love that. I also love how the farms that we have around us that I've been trying to explain to people for years that it's not trucked across the country. So it's as fresh as it can be. And now with the higher prices of everything, yes, they are still charging a little more than they used to, but it's better on our budgets.
It is. And honestly, at least, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but like, I think a lot of families are playing with how to budget with food now because it is so expensive. And I found that like when I tried to save money on the produce side, I just wouldn't eat it because it wasn't that good. It wasn't as good quality as what we have here in the Valley. So I just, I sort of gave that up and really sort of focusing on quality, not necessarily quantity.
I just try to figure out, like, I want everyone to realize that there are healthy options here and there are places that use so many good things. And no matter your budget, there are ways to get access to this stuff. There's even mobile markets down in the Springfield area.
Yeah, I actually think, and I think maybe in Chicopee has some decent fruit and vegetable stands, though. I think that have access to some of
They have a weekly farmers market, actually.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome.
So as a mom, you have your different ways of feeding the kids. And now that you have all this and you educate clients, the one thing I love that I saw on your website is no before and after pictures, because I always see those and I'm like, I don't know if that's helpful.
Oh yeah. So I made a pretty bold for the fitness industry, because the fitness industry standard is before and after pictures. That is like what you see everywhere. It's like trainers use it to market bodies that way. And, people also like show the world themselves in these before and after pictures. And I actually found that some clients were reluctant to even reach out for help, because they were afraid that I would put them through this, like take a naked picture of my body and send it to you, or half naked. Like it's a really vulnerable thing to do, to send to a stranger. So I was already on the fence about it. And then there's also there's some studies emerging around how before and after pictures can be harmful to sort of body image and sort of like mental health and how we view ourselves, even if we're not viewing those pictures of us. So even if we're viewing other people's, there's this thing that can happen. I'm not saying it happens to everybody. And so I just thought, you know what? If it prevents someone from coming to get help around moving their body, we don't need it. And we're not focused on that anyways. So that I made the decision that I'm just not going to use it. I do have a few clients who do it like a little bit on their own, not every week, not every day. They'll just, a year, I have clients who sign up for a whole year and they've been lifting really heavy weights, and like the scale doesn't show that you've gained muscle, but sometimes like a picture will show that. So if they're interested in sort of seeing some of that muscle development, then they may do that a little bit on their own. But
are these clients training for things?
Sometimes. They're doing all kinds of things. I have clients who train for half marathons. I have clients who are just learning to use weights and stuff. I have clients who are postpartum and just needing to sort of get back into their bodies without the like rigmarole of get your body back after baby kind of thing. So it's really like a safe place to land for people who are launching off into their own directions of movement.
I mean, you've had 2 babies. I never really understood that. I've never had kids, but I don't understand the whole, for women, why does, like, it took you 9 months to put the weight on. Why can't it take you at least that long or more to make it go away?
It is the amount of messaging that particularly pregnant women get about like, make sure you have this to get your body back, or take this tea, or, do this diet. It's really incredible. As someone who received those messages a lot as well. And sometimes like, regardless of weight, like your body sort of just shifts and changes a little after giving life, like growing a baby. And, some of the women that end up coming to me in their own process of sort of like, they just don't have the energy to like participate in hating their bodies as much. They're kind of like, okay, like I need to move, but without some of the other stuff that makes me feel bad, and sort of like start something new.
I get that. I can see how that happens. All right. I got one last question for you. So I love your core values, and I really believe in what you say as far as that on your website. But this time of year, I hate this time of year with all the ads on TV. That in like right before the new year, all those ads on TV for like products and diets and this. How do you feel about that? Because I don't ever, whenever somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, but I saw it on TV.
Oh, I obviously don't love it. The diet and fitness industry makes so much money on gimmicky, sort of short-term, quick little things that they repackage over and over, and they sell a ton at the new year. They sell a ton sort of before summer season, and it really plays on people's insecurities isn't quite the right word, but it really like sells you a dream, and it sells you something, and you're like, oh, this is going to fix everything. And it's really hard. I'm fighting against that. I'm trying to create a different message for folks to consume. And also just helping people to build actual sustainable healthy habits versus like jumping into the gimmick that's going to stop after 2 weeks. Really sort of supporting that development, because ultimately that stuff works in the long run versus sort of hopping on to some of the things that are short fixes that don't stick. So.
Well, to me, diets are always that whole, like, who wants to be caught in like the clothes we were wearing as kids in the 80s, or like what we wore as teenagers in the early 2000s? Like, who wants to be looking like that? And that's what diets are. In a few years, somebody else will have some other diet trend that comes up. So life is long. We need to always have a way to healthfully get through it. Yes. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers?
Yeah. Well, just thank you so much for having me. This conversation was really wonderful. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, Ashley, and hopefully connect maybe with some other folks as well.
I had a lot of fun having you on. It's always so nice to talk health and wellness with people. And we wish you the best of luck. Stay cool, stay hydrated today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Wasn't that nice? She has so many good ideas and such amazing wellness tips. So go to her website and check out everything she has. Oh, and I see someone wrote on Facebook they're enjoying our conversation. So thank you for writing in today. After our messages, we're going to come back with a no-bake treat, and then I'm going to share with you, I promise this week, I have a new project I'm going to share with you all. So right after these messages.
Hi, I'm Liz Teresa. I help women launch and build online businesses they love.
I needed to give my brand a web presence, but I didn't speak tech. Enter Liz Teresa. With lightning speed, she got the essence of my brand. Her guidance notes, her tips were practical and concrete.
She's the #1 person in my life. I'm so happy she came to me.
So thank you, Liz Teresa. I am so excited to keep working with you.
And we are back with Food for Life. I have an amazing no-bake treat that is reminiscent of Rice Krispie treats, but it's updated and more adult. I want to share with you guys my new project that I am so excited about. I'm going to put our little QR code up at the top. So I'm going to introduce to you, my company has launched its very own organic, locally sourced coffee. It's kosher, it's fair trade, it comes from an amazing blend. We're calling it Foodie Fuel. How cute is that? Can we see? That's my company at the bottom, Foodie, Bella Foodie, and we partnered with Fogbuster Coffee. Scan the QR code at the top if you want to go and see how you can purchase your own bag. I'm very proud of this. It's our first product we got to launch, and a lot of that is because of you guys and helping us get our name out there and share our message. So thank you. Try it. Go. It's great for iced coffee. All right. I'm going to leave that up while I'm talking. So I have my little Rice Krispie treats here. They are actually brown rice, sprouted brown rice with cacao. So they look like a cross between brown rice Rice Krispies and what like Cocoa Pebbles were when we were kids, but in a healthy way. Oh, so good. So I'm going to make kind of like a Nutella Rice Krispie treat. I melted down some coconut oil and some almond butter in the microwave because we just want it to get soft, and we don't want it to be like too, like we want it to be a little bit more liquidy, because if it's solid, it's not going to mix in. So I have about 4 cups here. And you can use any nut butter you want. You can use cashew. I just saw pistachio butter, which I really got to try that. I don't know about you. And you can use a hazelnut. I also have a 1/4 cup of chocolate little nuggets in here, which are my favorite ones for snacking. These are the Hue Kitchen Gems. They're made with coconut sugar. They are amazing. They're wonderful for a little pick-me-up in the afternoon or in your trail mix. Can you tell it's almost dinner time because I'm like eating everything while we're talking? All right, the chocolate's partially melted. We have a half a cup of our nut butter and a tablespoon and a half of coconut oil. Now we're gonna mix it in. I have an 8x8 that I sprayed. And the reason I sprayed it is I wanna make sure these come out. You can line your baking pan with parchment if you want, but I've been having a hard time finding the unbleached parchment. I've been trying to find it online, but I can't find it quite yet. So all you do is mix it together in the bowl. It's too hot to turn the oven on, but we all want a little something sweet at the end of the day. And as you can see, once it gets all shiny and good together, I'm gonna fold in a 1/4 cup of the gems. You can put anything you want in here, really. You could put in some dried cranberries, you could put in some chopped up nuts, whatever tastes good to you. But once we get it all coated and in, I have my little thing. And the best part is all you have to do is put it on the back counter, and by the time dinner's over, it'll be all ready to cut. I would say let it set up for about an hour or so, because if it doesn't set up for an hour, it's just not going to be ready to cut. But literally making this in front of your eyes. So make sure you press it down firmly, otherwise you're not going to get squares, trust me. I made that mistake once and I got just crinkly Rice Krispie treats, but they tasted really good. Now, if you wanted, I haven't been able to make or find healthy, like marshmallowy treat stuff that we usually like in this. So until I do, we're going to use nut butter. All right. And here we go. Perfect, see? It's gonna sit on my back counter until after I have my dinner, and this will be my treat. So make sure you guys tune in to my Instagram stories tonight, and you can see what they look like, all done and set and pretty. And by the end of the week, it'll be up on our blog. Have you guys made sure that you're subscribing to our show? Who hasn't been subscribing? So you can follow us on YouTube and subscribe, and you can get it and you can watch the show at any point. You don't have to be watching it live, or you can follow us on IG. There you go, tonight after the show, later on this evening. And one last thing, one last shameless plug for my lovely coffee. All right, I will see you guys next week. Stay cool, stay hydrated, and enjoy the rest of your week.